Welcome to the Fight Podcast with Jake and Nicci Hamilton,
where we discuss the complexities of marriage and manhood through real, raw, personal stories. Welcome to the Fight Podcast with Jake and Nicci Hamilton. Today we are going to be talking about pain and when things do not turn out the way you thought they would, and how that affects your marriage, how it affects you personally, and how it affects you as a couple.
We're super excited to jump into this. I hope it is helpful to you. So here it is. First of all, let me just say
Cheers.
that my favorite cup in the whole world, it's not sponsored, but it should be. Ember cups are the greatest cups ever invented if you like your coffee hot for at least an hour. You don't like hot coffee.
My coffee lukewarm.
You like your food lukewarm.
I do.
Yes.
I'm lukewarm.
Great.
Jesus would spit me out.
Wow. We don't need to go that far, but
anyways.
Yeah.
Okay. So today, center myself, because we're talking about hard stuff for me. Something actually we don't talk about publicly very much, which is the story of our daughter, Geneva, with cerebral palsy.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, she was diagnosed at 15 months. She was late. I'll let Nicci tell most of the story, but she was late walking. She has a twin cousin. They were born on the same day, and so there was a great gauge to be able to see where she was at in development sitting next to him, which led to some questions when things seemed to be missing. So,
yeah. I think as a mom, you have these intuitions, but as a first-time mom, you don't know how to read them as much. So looking back, I knew something was wrong, but it was so deep, I don't know how to process even what that means. And then it really wasn't until I saw my nephew doing things, right about that crawling age, what's that, 6 to 8 months, that I thought, oh, that's weird because Geneva can't do that. You kind of store that in the back of your brain. Fast forward, she's 15 months old. And by now our pediatrician has said, why don't you guys go see a neurologist? No, she was a pediatric. It doesn't matter. A more specialized doctor, let's say. And I feel my heart just racing talking about this, but trauma never fully goes away. I don't think it's always just there a little bit,
just beneath the surface.
Right. So fast forward to, she's 15 months old. We're there. I think your parents are there, and we're in this doctor's office, and the doctor says to me, can she walk? And it's like, well, no, she can't walk, but if she holds on to something, she can kind of, push it. So she said, okay, well, have her hold on to your stroller there, and I want to see her take a few steps. So I place my little 15-month-old baby down, and she, kind of walks a few little steps pushing this stroller, and the doctor looks over at me and says, oh, yeah, she has cerebral palsy. She'll never walk. She'll be in a wheelchair by the time she's 15. And then proceeds to send in CPS to the room, because I guess that's standard procedure at Kaiser. Cerebral palsy, I think, is can be caused by brain damage. So did we shake her? Did we do something to harm her? So that's the procedure they fall into. Of course, the CPS worker came in and pretty quickly realized that wasn't the case with Geneva. And that led us on a path of extreme, denial, I would say, for many years.
What does that look for you? What does denial look like? Because I think for a lot of people, it's so much easier to live in that space of denial. What was that like for you?
During that season, I coined a phrase that denial is like a warm, fuzzy blanket that I just never want to take off. Yeah. I'm generally pretty self-aware. So I knew I was in denial to some degree, this whisper of knowing that one day I'm going to have to face the facts that life is not going to be what I thought it was going to be. And for as long as I could allow it to remain normal, I did. And I look back at that and I don't know that I would change the way I handled it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I couldn't change the way I handled it.
Yeah.
But there was a season of time when you have a child who's diagnosed with something like that really young, that you kind of can pretend because, 15 months, there's a lot of kids not walking at 15 months and not developing.
Scooting around, doing all this stuff.
Right. So we could kind of just go along a little bit with what is quote unquote normal and not having to totally deal with the ramifications of what it would look like, in years to come. And it's painful to talk about. It's very painful to talk about, again, because these are things when you have something in your life with your kids or, in your life that is ongoing.
Right.
It's this continually unfolding and dying to what that means for you in your life. And in a lot of ways, I think what parents or people who are caretakers have to deal with is the fact that they don't get a funeral. And that has been one of the hardest things for me. And what I mean by that is when you have a death, this was a death for me. It was a death for both of us.
Right. And what do you mean by that? Because I
course,
think for people who haven't, so people who are still living in denial, they've rejected the idea of the death. Okay. They're putting it off. They're postponing this idea of there's a death. But what does that actually mean? Because, for most people, if they're denying it or they're living in that, what does that look like? What does it mean to?
Well, for me, it was the death of a dream, right? A child is a dream.
Right.
A child is a promise. A child is hope, because there's all the things that come with what that means to watch a child grow and the milestones that are going to happen, because that's what happens. So when those things don't pan out, the milestones don't happen, the plan for their life is not what you expected, there's a dying in that. And I have what sounds like just this really, I hold back to saying it because it's something I only say to other parents with children with special needs, because I don't know that it's understandable to somebody who does not have a child with a special need or a situation similar. That right around Geneva's birthday one year, someone that I saw on social media, their child had died.
Mm-hmm.
And they were having a funeral. It was the whole mourning thing that you go through. I mean, that's horrible. I can't comprehend what that would be like. But there was this place inside of me that felt a little bit jealous that they got to have a funeral and mourn something. Because it was around her birthday, and birthdays are always this time of, I'm supposed to be celebrating, because that's what a birthday is. You're celebrating, you're a year older, and it's this big party, and it's a whole thing. But I'm sitting there looking at all the things that are not happening the way I thought they would. It's like, okay, it's your third birthday and you're still not walking. And you still can't hold your little sippy cup.
Yeah. And
all the things that you can't do, which are marked and milestoned at a birthday. And it took me years to recognize, why are her birthdays so hard?
Right.
And it was at that time that I realized, oh my God, because I didn't get a funeral like this. I can't mourn it because she is alive, and praise God. I'm not in any way saying that I would want that, or that I can even relate to what it would actually be like to lose a child. But I know what it is to experience the death of something. And really, in realizing that, it gave me permission to grieve a little bit, which I hadn't given myself permission to do. And I don't know if that's familiar territory with a lot of people who experience something like this, because again, they're alive And there's people out there who didn't get to take their baby home from the hospital. And I did. It's like survivor's guilt, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, I can't be upset about this. And you want to celebrate their life.
Yeah,
and there's
absolutely.
wonderful things that come from it. So you're in this rendering of this is beyond comprehension, sad and painful, and at the same time there's this celebration of this life that's entered the world and these beautiful gifts that her life gives me.
Yeah.
So how do you hold that together? How do you hold together that life and death in one hand? Which I would say that's the gift that I got from the whole thing.
Well, what I'm wondering is back to the denial into grief. Do you feel like that really is the transition? Like, really, it's like the only thing that really breaks that sort of cyclical denial is the grieving of the loss, the actual mourning, the actual giving your self space to do that, not just once, but probably many times over the course of the journey. Like, is that how it plays out?
I don't know. I mean, I can speak to myself. It's like you eventually, for me, reality sets in and you have a 10-year-old and it's like, well, I can't be in denial that you have cerebral palsy anymore because we are lugging a wheelchair and equipment and AFOs, those are the things that the braces, the kind of plasticky you'll see on some people's feet, helping them stabilize. Anyhow, so I can't deny this anymore. And so that denial for me, that denial blanket just slowly had to leave. She, of course, is 19 now. So, well, next week.
Goodness gracious.
I know. So I don't know. I'm sure there's still things that I'm in denial about. I'm in denial about so she hasn't graduated high school yet. She'll graduate this year. Yeah. What is that going to mean? Because again, you're dealing with this thing that's supposed to be this joyous occasion of graduation. And really it's like, oh my God, what does this mean for your life? I mean, you're not going to get a job. You're not moving out. You're not like going to college, like all the things that the other kids are doing, she's not doing.
Right.
And so how do you celebrate that and mourn it at the same time?
Yeah. Going back to even the beginning, I mean, I think we were working at the church at the time. We had planted a church with friends and we were working there. And so there was, a high degree of religious activity happening around us. And, you know, when you're leading something like that, there's tons of theology and opinions and all of the things that went around that season. Cause my default was, immediately I'm like, what does this mean? Like mine was like, okay, like where is God? Like, where is he actually? Like when this stuff happens, because we grew up in sort of Baptist theology. So there's no, like, we've never talked about healing or miracles or any of that stuff. So that was not something that was like, well, now we just pray and we believe in faith and all those things. It was like, okay, so are we just are we all screwed? Like, is she screwed?
And I can say that in the church we were in at that time, it was like a non-denominational
evangelical church.
So we didn't have a lot of grid at that time for what do you do with your pain and what do you do with a child he's like, okay, you pray. It's like everyone, pray, whatever. Really what it was is everyone's like, they helped me in my denial with everyone just going, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like I look back and I'm like, why didn't one person come and say something to me?
Right.
No one even was like, I'm going to pray for you, because that would almost be acknowledging it too much.
Right.
And I do not say that as a criticism, because in that season of my life, had I not been the one, I would have responded the way everyone else did, because that's just I didn't have a tool in my belt other than.
I think that's what so many people do when they see people in pain, right? Like, so I see you in pain. I don't know what to do with that. I've never been in that situation. So I'm going to try to help you forget about it so that I don't have to think about it either. And we can all just be okay. Can we all just be all right? And I think specifically even in religious circles, it's, it is either one or the other side. I'm going to like pray and demand healing, or I'm going to like just ignore this is even happening. Because that was my point, is I'm going like, well, because my diving into church stuff was like going, well, I don't know where to put any of my pain. So I'm going to like try to ask a few people. And I ended up with that book, Surprised by the Power of Holy Spirit by Jack Deere, who's a Dallas theological seminarian. Like he was a professor and his wife was sick and not getting better and going like, where do I turn? So that was his whole process. I don't need to go into the book, but it allowed me space to go, oh, like I can, I actually have a space to give God this pain, but it was my version of denial and detachment. It was like, oh, I can give this to God and it looks super faithful. And it did for a long time, I think, in the sense of like it led us to all the sort of, stuff that we got involved with and the places we ended up connecting to. But I think there was a large degree of it. It was my form of denial, which, is work, and I'm workaholic by nature anyway. So it was like my form of work to dive in and be able to put on some blinders and go, no, it's all God's. But it allowed me not to, probably in that season, feel less engaged than I should have been.
Would you say that you spiritualized it?
Oh, I absolutely. It's super easy if you get the right language around it to take it and make it spiritual, or to be like, here, God, it's yours, which looks like faith. And I know part of that is true. It's got a fraction of truth in it. But then it really, what I was saying is now I can disassociate with it and I don't have to engage with it on a really deep heart, personal, physical body level. We can just play pretend as long as we can. No, it's going to be okay. It's going to be good. It's going to be all right. And we were less connected at that time than we are now. So it was just I
don't think we ever talked about it. Did we?
Yeah.
Do we remember having conversations about this is painful, this hurts, how are you processing it?
No. I remember crying at the hospital and then us kind of just going, because it became a matter of what do we do? Like what resource? Because it really, leaving there, we left with a bunch of paperwork, right? Like all this paperwork of like, we've got to do stuff.
Yeah. So I think I went into the because then you have to have therapy.
Yep.
And then you have early intervention and all these people now and doctors are coming in and having opinions about the way you should do things. And I think even, the family is like, oh, well,
this is what you
Everyone
should do.
has a
Everyone
comment.
has an
And
opinion.
I had no idea what I was doing. So I sort of delved into the doctor's appointments and you delved into the reading religious
I went
books,
into religious Bible theology stuff.
and we never communicated.
We never connected about
I actually feel
pain.
so sad for us that we weren't able to connect about that. Neither one of us knew how.
And what's so hard is like, what rises up in me is like, that's really it, it's sad, but what's really frustrating is you're surrounded by so many people that are trying to help by removing the pain instead of helping engage in it. And so you're left on these islands going, well, I'm going to process it the way I need to process it, which we each did. You know what I mean? Like we were both doing it in the most least dysfunctional way we could, and in some ways totally dysfunctional, but there was no way to bridge these hearts. You know what I mean? Like to bridge the conversation.
And no one reaching out, which I think I don't have resentment for at all. And I don't blame anyone in our life in that season for not doing it. However, I do say, like, even if you are listening to this and you see someone who's going through something hard, reach out. I wish someone would have reached out and said, preferably someone a little further along down the road and said, hey, even saying, hey, I know what you're going through is hard.
Well, like literally, like this has happened twice now at 2 different fight nights that we do for families. Of course, there's a couple times there's girls in a wheelchair, little girls in a wheelchair, and it's a mom pushing them along and doing their thing. And I just like immediately grab the mom and just hug her. And because it's the mom who gets like lost, and her husband was just like, I don't know what he's, like everyone's just in survival.
Right.
So to just go, I know this is painful. And I just want to say, I see your pain. No prophetic words and great prayers, or just like to engage in someone's pain is like this ridiculously beautiful, selfless act from
Right.
one human to another. But what it did was it also created a gap where the husband was like, dude, I've never said anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I was like, you have to engage with this,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because it's just easier to be like, we're good, or who knows, and that left us, I think, in tons of years of feeling like we weren't connected, but how could we be when there's this giant thing in between us?
And I didn't know how you were processing your pain, and you didn't know how I was processing my pain. And that is something I wish we know that now. And I wish we would
Yeah.
have known that sooner in our marriage, so that season, thank God it didn't take us out. I mean, it nearly took us out,
Yeah.
but we're still here.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of people it does take them out because they
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
how their spouse is processing pain, and so it becomes personal. It's
Right.
like, oh, I see the way you're reacting, the way you're responding, that feels personal to me, and not and you're not able to recognize, oh, actually you're just going through something right now and it has nothing to do with me, and my role in your life is just to love you through it.
Yeah.
We didn't know how to love each other through those places.
Right.
And thank God you had your religious books, which, I think everyone would say like, oh, religion is so bad and you don't want to do that. But you know what? In that season, it saved you.
It totally did.
So we can't throw stones at things that save us in seasons. And
Right.
for me, again, people would say, oh, denial, you shouldn't be in denial. And it's like, well, denial saved me in that season.
Right.
So I'm not really going to throw a stone at it.
Right. All we're saying is that the thing that we missed was those things saved us on islands.
Right.
They didn't save us together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why most people who go through even abuse, disabled kids, like, trauma, loss of a child, the percentage rate of divorce is insanely high for couples who go through trauma like that,
Mm-hmm.
who are wrestling through that stuff. And the reason I can see why, because it's like, well, I have 0, 20, 25, even 30. I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's trying to help. They're like,
Mhm.
oh, you're doing religion well. You're doing really great meetings and you write great worship
Mhm.
songs. And we had this, like, it was like this weird image of
Right.
like, you know what I mean? It's so
Mhm.
to be able to figure out how to bridge the two islands that we were on, even if we needed to stay on them for a little while.
Right.
Like if we just knew how to meet each other halfway and go back and forth, it would have changed the game for us completely.
Well, and that's what happens once you don't need the tools. I think again, this is a work in progress. We have a 19-year-old
Yeah.
who will live with us forever. And I don't know what even June looks like when she graduates. So there's so much that we're still processing.
Yeah, we're in it.
However, I can say that I think what we have learned with each other is how to have grace in this area of going like, okay, I'm never going to fully know how this affects you.
Right.
And you're never going to fully know how this affects me.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to respond to it in different ways. And I can't get mad at you that you're not responding the way I'm responding, and
Right.
vice versa. And when you're having a hard day over whatever, it's like, how much of this are you actually having a hard day?
That's a huge point.
About, because you're dealing, and with me that happens a lot. I'll be having a really hard day and I kind of, I'm a girl, so I'm gonna get catty and maybe be a little snarky, and for me to be able to recognize, oh, it's because actually I just had this interaction with Geneva and it was painful, but I can't be mad at her and I can't be mad at the situation.
Absolutely.
And this is subconscious, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I realize I'm just pissy, 6 hours later. Of course, it's always your fault because you're the one I'm closest to.
Makes
so
sense.
I'm definitely going to be a fantastic punching bag. But for us to realize like, oh, actually I was having a hard time with that. And the grace is, I think, the gift that we have learned. Not in any way do we do this perfect all the time.
Yeah.
But that's what we have tried to do. And I think it's been
Yeah.
good.
I still suck at it all the time, but that's like, even at, so many of the stories and stuff we have at like a fight weekend or things of that nature, like it's men realizing the space they can hold for their wives while realizing that they're having emotions themselves.
Yeah.
So that's like I mean, that's a huge statement. You know what I mean? Like, I, as a man, am going to hold space for your pain and recognize that sometimes the hits you're throwing have zero to do with me, although you're telling me with your language
Yeah.
they do. Like,
Right.
we have to, a fully confident, fully formed man who's walked through initiation knows how to hold that space and be able to take a hit without feeling like they have to defend themselves because they see the landscape as a whole. You're hurting, therefore I can hold that space. Wow, I'm hurting too, so I'm not going to deny my own hurt, but I'm going to recognize I can't put that on the table right now for your sake. Like, that to me is one of the most beautiful definitions of masculinity. You know what I mean? To be able to do that. And I'm watching guys like in fight weekends or on the Man Talk Mondays or sparring sessions, whatever we're doing at the time, all of a sudden they're like, why has nobody told me I can do that? Like, why is oh, she did throw a punch at me, like emotionally, you know, not physically, and like emotionally or whatever. You're right. Oh my God, that wasn't me. And I knew it wasn't me. So I needed to tell her, this isn't me, which is the least helpful thing you can do when people are in pain, you know? So to be able to, like, I feel like I'm still on that journey of learning how to do that, to go like, oh, when you have an appointment with Geneva, or it's getting close to graduation, or this thing's happening, my job in this is not to fix or figure out, it's just to hold space for that, you know, and to be able to go, yeah, if you need to be a little snarky or a little whatever, that actually is super healing and helpful to hold that space for the person who's in pain at that time. Then you can reciprocate it for me later when it's like, okay, like, this is really affecting me, you know?
My nose is like running.
I'll cut it out.
Yeah, and the beauty of having you do that is it gives me safety to be able to not have to wear so much denial.
Yeah.
Because I'm safe now. I have a place that I can process that. And that which is why I say, you know, these mechanisms that we use, which, you know, for me was denial, this denial blanket, that's not a bad thing because it actually served a purpose in keeping me safe. When it becomes a bad thing is when I no longer need to have it because I am safe and I'm still using it.
Yeah.
So now that we have developed this pattern, number one, of me being able to recognize, oh, not immediately. Sometimes it takes a few days. Sometimes it's an hour.
Yeah.
Recognize, oh, I am struggling with something that I am dealing with Geneva or anything in my life.
Yeah.
Being able to recognize that and knowing that I can come to you and say, hey, this is a hard day for me.
Yeah.
And you're going to give me space for that. And sometimes just let me pound on your chest.
Yeah.
It just, I don't have to use those tools anymore. Right. I can just feel it. And I think for me, for years, I thought if I allow myself to feel this, I will get on the floor and start crying and never get up.
That is what we talked about before, which is like I do believe that the movement from denial to like real wholeness, like I'm going to embrace this, I'm actually going to engage with it. It's like that step between denial and grief is safety. There's like containment. And once I have that, then I can grieve. And so many people that we've talked to where they go, I know it's like we give language to it, which is, I think the reason you're not going to let yourself hurt is for what you just said, which is if I start crying, I might not ever stop. So I'm just going to not do that.
Especially I'm a non-emotional person.
Yeah.
Like I really have a hard time allowing myself to express emotion. For me, that feels vulnerable. And then I don't want to feel vulnerable, which is funny because I'm pretty honest. I'll tell you everything that's going on with me, but it's one step detached from tears.
Wow.
And, cause that just I don't trust myself in tears. I don't know what my body's going to do because I have not had a lot of experience in
Wow.
tears. I don't trust my body, and I really need to be in control of everything here with me. And that part I don't feel I can control. However, I can say that over the years, feeling safe and allowing myself to cry, you do stop. I know that sounds stupid to someone who maybe cries regularly.
Yeah.
But if you're like me,
No, that's real.
it actually won't kill you. Now it's going to suck for like 2 days because crying gives you a headache. I hate that feeling.
And you have a vulnerability hangover.
I hate that. But you do stop. And I notice now that I can cry a lot less and still like allow myself to feel it. But it's not going to be all day or all month or the next 3 years, which is what I tell myself.
Yeah.
If I let this come out, it's never going to end.
Well, I think most men are in that spot where they're like, I want, and I think you just said it, which is so interesting because it's like, well, no, what I want is control.
Yeah.
And crying and grief, which I'd never thought of it this way. Crying and grief relinquishes control to that thing that hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it actually does. Like you can't
Right.
deny that this is something that I'm literally giving over control
Right.
to the pain that's in my body. But if I don't, if I don't do it intentionally through grief, it will manifest in other ways I don't want it to manifest. Like it will take control by me getting angry at my spouse, by me getting frustrated with this person, or, being disassociated to this thing or this person or this resource. So it's like we have to fully engage with it intentionally through grief and let it have control for a minute, so that it actually has full expression in our bodies, which, I mean, I am the Bible guy, but that's like, to me, I'm like, that is where it says, blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to get comforted in terms of heaven's perspective is if I grieve.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not willing to engage in grief, I cannot be comforted by heaven. But also, if I don't engage with grief, I will find comfort. I'll just settle for a way more dysfunctional form of comfort.
Maybe food.
I think food is one of the least ones, but it can be bad.
Oh, yeah,
but
it
you're
can be
talking
bad.
like, right. But I'm saying, like, in so many ways, it's food, it's alcohol, it's drugs, it's porn. It's like, because what I'm doing is I'm saying that dysfunction I'm in control of. I will put this food in my mouth.
Yeah.
I will eat the way I want,
Yeah.
but I will not relinquish control to grief. But I'm also denying myself deep, formidable, formation-giving comfort. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to grow. I'm just going to stay in this perpetual cycle of denial and self-comfort,
Yes. And also, allowing yourself to grieve is allowing yourself to be open to the wisdom that the grief or the pain is there to teach you.
So good.
So you'll see these. I do believe that the doorway to wisdom is pain.
Yeah.
And if you want to know anything and you want to have anything of wisdom to offer anybody around you, which I would think we all do.
Yeah.
You have to engage with grief. Otherwise, and you'll see this with people, this is kind of what I noticed. It's like you'll see people who are amazing, and the wisdom that they carry and the understanding of humanity and the world around them is just profound.
Yep.
100% of the time, these are the people who have experienced excruciating pain in their life.
Absolutely. And did not ignore it.
Then there's these other people. And they've also had really hard things happen in their life, and they're almost infantile because of it.
Yeah.
And the difference is grief. When you engage with that pain, it opens the door to why the pain is there and what the pain has to teach you. So it's almost like you're going to experience, the pain is the non-negotiable part, which sucks, man. That sucks. Why? Well, I'll ask God, why pain? The pain's non-negotiable, but the fruit on the other side is completely in your hands. And I say that as if it's like, oh, that's so easy. So just grieve. And maybe for some people, grief comes easy. It does not come easy for me. And so I recognize the cost on your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body to say grieve. But what I can say is that, dang, it's worth it.
Yeah, and I would say that grief is not easy for anyone because really, so what we end up doing is saying grief is easy for me because your grief is easy for me.
Yeah.
But the truth is, the things that I have to grieve,
Yeah.
they cost me way more because
I
they're
guess when I'm
personal to
saying
me.
that,
You know what I
there's
mean?
people who I feel like are, well, you're very emotional.
But see, that's the point is people get away with
Right.
not grieving the parts that hurt them the most because they're more emotional or they cry.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, tears are a part of grief. They are not actual intentional engagement
Yeah.
with pain. They can just be, I'm sad about this, which is huge. Great. I don't want to write that off.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't want to give emotional people or people who cry easier than
Mm-hmm.
others this get out of jail ticket free because you must be doing grief well. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that's not actually from real experience with couples and men. Like the reality is, oh no, you're crying about the reason it hurts, but you're not grieving the pain that
Mhm.
caused it. And that is way different.
Well, and people have asked, what do you mean? What is grief? Where's mourning? Like, what does that even mean? And I feel like the best way I can describe it is it comes from your gut.
Absolutely.
It's the cry of your heart.
Yeah.
And you feel it in it's
Absolutely.
guttural.
Yeah.
That's when you know you went from crying to grief.
Right. Well, and it really what it is it's twofold. I think, I mean, we say this all the time, but the real path to transformation is if you're like, there's like the level of stuff happening to me that causes it, that catalyzes it. Great love or great sorrow catalyzes me into a path of transformation. The first two steps on the path of transformation are always honesty and responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
which means I have to be honest. Real grief is when I finally can be honest that this happened to me or this is where I am. Like there's no crossing over until you can be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second step is I have to take responsibility for that. This is my actual life. I can pretend I have a different life. I can pretend I have a different situation, different circumstance. But at the end of the day, I have to take responsibility for what is, not what I wish was.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not just at that point, if you're not going to be honest and take responsibility, you're not in denial anymore. You're in delusion. Because now you're creating a fantasy life with cycles that don't actually exist and aren't real. And so you're going to pay more of a cost long-term down the road because of the delusion,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah. And I'm still unfolding this. I think we both are still unfolding this process of learning how to grieve, learning how to be present in what is.
Oh God, yes.
And really remain flexible to what the day as a caretaker is going to bring.
Yeah. I think it just, like, you just have to, for us, like, I still have a hard time sometimes just embracing the suck. I hate being inconvenienced. You know that. Like, I spill something or something trips, I'm going somewhere. It's like, that's where I suck at it. It's like, I just suck because I'm like in this area, in the sense where I need growth. I don't suck at blah, blah, whatever. I need growth in this area of grief because sometimes I'm just trying to speed through all the work and life that I have to get done. And it's easier for me just to do the task than it is to engage with the reality of what I'm actually experiencing, you know?
Yeah. And when you have a child who has special needs, life doesn't go at your pace.
No.
You're very much dictated by the pace of your child. And you feel like, okay, we get to a season of life where we don't have to do that anymore because you're kind of grown up and you can take your own path. Well, with a child with special needs, you're kind of at their mercy forever. It's this lifelong, I don't know when this is never going to end.
Right.
You know? So there's a lot there. One of the things I wanted to talk about before we finish up was...
one last thing before we finish up. Go for it. What do you want to do?
Well, so we said when Geneva was diagnosed, we were at this Baptist type non-denominational church. So people didn't really know how to handle us. We didn't have a lot of grid for what do you do when things, when there's pain or suffering. And, so it was like, oh yeah, I'm kind of praying for you, but more I'm just going to pretend it's not happening.
So much easier for me.
You went on your journey of reading books, which brought us to the awakening of the Holy Spirit and took us from that church, brought us into the charismatic realm, which we had no grid for
I had
at
no
that
grid.
time.
Just to be clear, when we entered into this world, like I had no TBN background. The only thing I'd ever been told about Holy Spirit at that point was that anybody who preaches the baptism of the Holy Spirit is going to hell. Like it wasn't like it's bad theology. This is how far away we were from this reality.
Yes. So we jump out of that and plant a house of prayer.
Yeah, that was convenient.
And
I'm slightly an extremist. So
yeah. That's another
we'll save that for another story.
Trauma story of ministry. But we do that, and all of a sudden now we're pushed in this world where God's going to heal her. And everybody wants to pray for you. Oh. And so that felt kind of refreshing at first.
Well, there was engagement. So that's a step in the right direction.
Right. People want to be engaged with, right? Yeah. So like you
Seen
want
and
to be
heard, yeah.
acknowledged. Before that, no one had even acknowledged that this was happening to us.
Right.
You know, that there's this huge thing going on in our life that was really hard and really different, and nobody was saying anything, you know? And so, which I understand. I mean, just this side note, I have met so many mothers of children with special needs, and they'll come to me and they'll say things like, oh yeah, and so, you know, they said whatever they said that was to them politically incorrect about their child's diagnosis or the way they wanted to be comforted. And I just want to say, please don't do that. Like people, if they're saying anything at all, they are trying their best.
It cost them a lot to get that far.
They don't know what to say. Nobody's goal is to offend you.
No.
So like, let's just like not be, I've had some wild things said to me, but I know that they're just trying, you know? So in order for, we have to make this a little easier for people. This is an awkward situation. If your life looks different than everybody else's in a way, nobody knows what to do with you or what to say with you. And that doesn't mean that they're against you and that they're trying to offend you.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Please, like, let's not be offended by what people's attempts look like. So anyways, or if they don't say anything at all, because I have also been that. I think had I not been in this position, I would definitely have been the person to not say anything at all because I didn't want to mess it up. And I'm not evil. I just my personality.
You're great.
Side note. So that's a side note. But so now we're in this world. Everybody wants to pray for us. Everyone wants to tell us God's going to heal Geneva. It feels very refreshing for the first 5 years, I guess. Actually, then, so that's the struggle that comes if you're in a charismatic world and you have a special need. Everyone wants to tell you God's going to heal you. So when God doesn't heal you, what does that mean about you? Does that mean that this was my fault and God's punishing me? Does it mean that I did something wrong? And if I would have just prayed, like maybe I didn't pray enough while I was pregnant and that's why this happened. Maybe it's because, you know, when I was a teenager, I did A, B, and C and I'm being punished. Or maybe really what it is God just doesn't love me and God doesn't care about me at all. And I can tell you many years I see going to all the prayer meetings. Yeah. I really felt the best picture I could say is like, you know, those cartoons where like the cartoon character has the magnifying glass on the little ant and the sun shining on it. Yeah. I felt like I was that little ant just being scorched. And it was the pleasure of God to scorn me. And this was just a great game to see how I squirmed. And I don't know, looking back, what was better, people ignoring me or people telling me that God was going to heal Geneva? I still don't have an answer.
That's the hard part is I guess the way that, you know, in this world, we've been in it for a little while. I've seen crazy things and that I can't explain, and I've been a part of crazy things I can't explain. And the two stories that stick out to me is number one, when, you know, it's just this, I guess to simplify it, because I could go on a million tangents about this, because I know that like This is something I've sat in terms of theology, experience, conversations with people. And I'll never forget, and you know the story, we're at this big event and somebody's on the platform preaching healing. All these people come forward. Well, Geneva's there. So Geneva is like up on the second story, you know, experiencing all this, like going, yeah. And I know this person on the platform and I know these things and these are people I'm around and there's 30,000 people in the stadium and all these people are running forward and they're getting healed and this is happening. And she's like trying to stand up out of her wheelchair and she's super excited and super sweet. And then, you know, the long and short of it is clearly she's still in her wheelchair. The guy who's like on the platform doing this, which is all great intention. There's no ill intent in this stuff. I'm not saying that this person's ill intended for doing that. That's part of, you know, I know that's a part of who God is. But then when he gets upstairs and she wheels over to him, dude, she doesn't have no filter for this stuff. So she's just like, hey, why didn't I get healed? And there's no answer.
No, it made him really uncomfortable, and he just laughed and walked away. Not laughed, but, you know, kind of uncomfortably like, ha, 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 okay.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is, I'm going like, if you're ill-prepared to care for those in some way when it doesn't go the way you just demanded and declared, if you're not prepared to do some sort of care or give some sort of space and containment for that, and I can say it, I guess I would say it really harsh. That disappointment is your fault. Like it is. You're a leader. Like you have to create space for that. You can't go up there and say a bunch of really hype words so that everybody applauds you afterwards. And then like I guess the story I end up going to is I go, man, what a crap day for the guy who was sitting next to the guy that got healed at the pool of Bethesda. That's always the story I think about, you know? Jesus rolls up to the pool of Bethesda. There's all these people there they're there for healing, you know, stir the waters, angels, the whole thing. And Jesus goes up, talks to one dude, and is like, pick up your mat and walk. The dude next to him is laying there too. I mean, I imagine this like a really great meeting, you know? They're like, yes, it's my turn. Finally, Jesus is showing up. The person next to me got healed. And the guy's like, and then he opens his eyes and Jesus is gone. Dude next to him took his mat and he's gone. What do you say to that dude? Because those people are in our meetings. And if we're not creating space for that kind of disappointment and woundedness and hurt and all the stuff that comes with it that you mentioned, all the conversations internally and spiritually and psychologically and emotionally and physically, if we're not going to take responsibility for that, then just shut your mouth. It is not worth, it ends up doing more damage if you're not going to take responsibility for the care and just take responsibility for the charismania that builds your platform.
Yeah.
That to me is like so irresponsible and so damaging to everyone involved.
Yeah.
Everyone. Because then, I don't know if that makes sense. I just
it does. Well, because we've kind of been the ones in the meeting who were sitting next to the guy who said they got healed.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And
well, I remember specifically being, I don't know why this stands out, because we spent a lot of times, this is what we did, right?
Yeah.
These meetings, like so many of these wonderful meetings. We were with someone in our group and they got healed of their eyesight got healed. You know, they wore glasses.
Yeah.
They didn't have to wear glasses anymore. This was an adult. He's like running up. I don't have to wear glasses anymore. I can see, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking, so, okay, God. So that's what you care about. That's what you care about. Eyesight. I mean, the guy's not blind. This is a guy who just had, you know, not 20/20 vision.
Yeah.
Great. That's the kind of God you are.
Right.
Great. Well, I'll sit back here with my daughter in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Not really even able to talk and can't feed herself and can't use the bathroom without help. I'll sit here with that. But I'm glad you got healed. I'm being cynical, but that's where I was at that moment, you know?
Right.
And so a lot of meetings like that and a lot of experiences like that. We also live in Redding, California, Where everywhere you go, I'm like a walking, with my daughter, everywhere I go, I'm a walking billboard of, I probably need prayer. You know, Gigi probably needs prayer. It's like, please stop asking us. Please, there's plenty of people here who are disabled. You just can't see them. Geneva has a chair, so you're going to pray for her. Again, I'm being cynical because it's
No.
painful. I also understand these are good intentioned people.
Right, but I think the thing is I think what we want to expose by this last part of our conversation is we want you to know how it feels on the other side. Because we actually are the majority. We're the majority. Our experience is the majority. So if we're not going to take responsibility for that, if we as the church or we as believing people of faith who actually believe in the gifts and the power of the Holy Spirit aren't going to take responsibility for that, then we're actually doing a greater disservice. Because what our daughter actually needs is someone who's going to be her friend, regardless of whether or not she's in a wheelchair. So just show up and say hi. She's probably buying boba. You could just buy her boba. You could just be nice. Say hi. Treat her like a human being.
Right. It feels like way easier for people to come up and give us 5 seconds where they can walk away like a hero because they did something for God by praying for this poor child, as opposed to just be friendly, make a conversation. Yeah. You know, Geneva is a human being, and what she wants more than anything is to just be connected to people.
That's it.
Just to have someone sit for 5 minutes and talk to her, that is so much more healing than you thinking you're going to pray her out of her wheelchair. You know,
people have no clue the kind of psychological, emotional, and inner healing that it brings a human being who's in suffering, not just in suffering, but feels abnormal to everyone else they're seeing. Like, and to just be engaged with on a very normal level. And to be honest with you, that's more uncomfortable for people to do. Like you said, it is way easier for me. Like, can I pray for you? Well, that's way harder than me. Like, hi, what's your name?
Yeah. And again, I get it. I do not want to seem at all like I don't know, putting anybody down who's trying.
I do. I just want to put everybody down. Honestly,
you know, because I know that had I not had a child with special needs, I would not be in this position. So I cannot stand on a soapbox.
But what we can say is this is our experience. Right. We're just we are not being cynical. We're trying to we're exposing you to actual human experience.
Right.
And you can choose not to look at it. You can not agree with us. You can think it's dumb and it's our fault. We don't have enough faith. We don't, at this point, we're good. The real point is we're just trying to expose you from one family, from one story, what it's been like to process the pain and the agony of this beautiful girl who's in our life, how it's affected and the reverberations of her life have affected us as her parents, her siblings, her extended family. And all the people we meet. And the best thing, the most Jesus thing that you can offer is to say, I see you.
Yeah.
Not for what you could be, but for what you are. I choose to engage with you where you are is way more Christ and requires way more faith than anything else you could offer. And that is not just disabled children, although it's a great place to start, but it's every person you encounter. It's from the homeless guy that is inconveniencing you because you have to walk by him, but you chose that way. So now that they're on that path, it might be wise to engage with it. The person that's in your life that's going through a really crappy season and you don't really want to talk about it because you don't have any answers to offer them, but they actually just need somebody to sit with. They need empathy. They need connection. They want to be seen and heard. And to me, that is way more Christ-like than anything else we could offer another human being in terms of what it looks like, what it means for our relationship with God. You know? And so,
well, that's probably where we should end it, is that it becomes very complicated, your relationship with God, when you have something. Everyone's relationship with God is complicated. When you have something in your life that makes absolutely no sense. And when you live in a church world that tells you, in my instance, oh yeah, God heals this. And he doesn't. And it becomes personal. And now you have to wrestle with, what does that mean? And you have to wrestle with a church that's left you feeling like you've done something wrong.
Yep.
And what do you do with that? And I do not have the answer to what you do with that. No. I'm still working that out. Although what I can say again is I have learned that in Christ, you hold life and death in one hand. And that's very hard to do. The church does a very poor job of teaching that. It's like even visually, we have like death on one side and life on the other. And it's like, if once you receive Jesus, you walk into life. And I understand all the pictures and I understand the theology behind it. But in practical life, that becomes extremely complicated when life and death are in your day all the time. Okay. And nobody tells you that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Nobody tells you that really the picture is life and death held in one hand. This is the tension that we live in. Yep. The tension that is a sign you are alive. Yep. And you're living in a broken world. And you are not the problem. You are not the brokenness. It's not something that's just faulted in you that everybody else seems to have gotten together and you somehow didn't. So you probably should be hiding in the back, because only people they invite to the stage are the people who have gotten healed, or the people who have figured everything out, or the people who are fixed products. Yep. And so now you're left in the back row feeling like a real sham. Like, what am I doing here? Because this is never going to get fixed. And I want to tell you that you are not broken, that life is meant to be held in one hand, death and life. You can, that's actually the way it's meant to be. You can be completely broken and completely whole all at the same time. And that story that I'm trying to continually tell myself is God loves right where I'm at. And even though there are days that I have absolutely thrown my middle finger, and if we cussed on this podcast here, I would say all the
things,
explicit things that I actually have said to God.
Yeah.
100% have yelled up with middle fingers to the sky. How could you do this? Why aren't you answering my prayers?
Right.
Why is this happening? And it's because it's not, as a parent or even a spouse, like if it's happening to someone you love, you'd so much rather it happen to you. So to watch someone you love suffer is, I think, 5 times harder than to suffer yourself. So why, God? Why are you doing this? And he could never be more silent than in those places of pain. And so I have to hold that together. And in the very same breath that I am throwing my fingers in the air, my fists in the air, and I'm giving everything away and saying I'm walking away, I am clinging on to Jesus with all that I have. Yeah. And I think anybody who hears that and has been there goes, I know exactly what you mean. And that's it. That's the holding life and death in one hand. It's like, it's not, everything's great, everything's okay, oh good, then I'm in life right now and that's where I need to live. And the minute I turn the corner and I start feeling the least bit of like I'm holding death, like I feel like everything in me is dying. I'm on the wrong path now. I need to get back to life. No, you're right where you belong, standing in that tension. Yep. That is where I believe true Christianity happens. I believe that's the walk that everyone is trying. That's where we're trying to get, is that place where you got one stake on each side and you're going, I'm not going to move from here. It's not when it's all, I think I didn't learn that in church. I learned that caring for Geneva.